This is a reading from Modern Saints by Anne Ball. 12. Saint Bernadette Soubirous, born 1844, died 1879 in France at the age of 35. Many Catholic families are familiar with the story of the miraculous apparitions of Our Lady at Lourdes. Most know that she appeared to a little French girl, Bernadette Soubirous, who is now known as Saint Bernadette. Was she canonized simply because she was privileged to see the Blessed Mother? No, although this is certainly an important part of her story. The Church canonized not only the visionary of Lourdes, but also the nun of Nevers, living with extreme ill health and spiritual sufferings. Bernadette remained kind and humble, and she offered herself as a victim to our Lord. Bernadette was the oldest of the 4 surviving children of 9, born to a poor miller and his wife in the La Paca quarter of Lourdes, France. 5 children had died in infancy when Bernadette was about 12. Francois lost his mill through poor management, and the family moved from one room to another, finally arriving in a single room in an old building, which was loaned to them by a cousin. Even at no charge, the room was not much of a bargain. The building had originally been a jail, and the family's room on the first floor overlooked a dung heap and a stable yard. The room next to theirs was occupied by their cousin's livestock. The building was of stone and very damp, which contributed to an odor which was less than pleasant, to say the least. The room was only large enough to hold a cupboard and the family's 3 beds with a fireplace for cooking. Both parents worked at odd jobs when they were available, but could not seem to get ahead. A typical breakfast for the family consisted of slices of a rough maize bread, similar to cornbread, rubbed with garlic and sprinkled with salt. In spite of the poverty of her home, and despite asthma, which kept her in poor health, Bernadette was always very neat and clean. She was a good needlewoman, and her mending jobs were so neatly done that friends remarked that they looked like embroidery. In 1857, the family was in such a desperate situation that they were happy to agree when Bernadette's foster mother, Marie Lague, asked to take Bernadette home to Bartra with her. Madame Lague promised to send Bernadette to school and to teach her catechism. Instead, she sent her out in the fields to watch her sheep. Here, Bernadette spent her time playing with the sheep and praying the rosary. In spite of the type of existence her family was forced into because of finances, Bernadette was a cheerful child, warm and loving. Although Madame Lague used her to watch the sheep instead of sending her to school, as she had promised, there was much affection between the two. At night, Madame would get out the catechism and try to teach Bernadette. Tired and puzzled by the difficult French, Bernadette spoke a dialect of the district, in which she had to memorize the sentences without being able to read the words, Bernadette seemed a very poor pupil. After 2 years, Bernadette realized that she would be unable to learn her catechism at Bartra, and she wanted to make her first Holy Communion. At her request, she returned to her family in Lourdes. On February the 11th, 1858, the 14-year-old girl Bernadette and 2 friends went to gather firewood. They stopped near the Gave River to remove their shoes and wade across the small stream. They were near a natural grotto at a place called Massabielle. The other children waded into the icy stream and ran ahead, but Bernadette hesitated for fear that the cold water might bring on another asthma attack. Suddenly she heard the sound of rushing wind and saw a bright light near the grotto. In this light appeared a lady whom again In this light appeared a lady whom Bernadette later described as being so beautiful that to see her again one would be willing to die. Bernadette felt inspired to pray the rosary and slipped the well-worn beads out of her pocket. The lady seemed to smile, and she joined in the Glory be to the Father prayers. At a subsequent apparition, the lady asked Bernadette to return each day for 15 days, which the young girl promised to do. During the apparitions, the lady gave Bernadette a number of messages. The main purpose of most of her requests was to ask people to do penance for their sins. The lady gave Bernadette some messages for herself, which she never revealed. She also asked for a chapel to be built at the grotto and for processions. During one of the apparitions, she asked Bernadette to drink from the spring. Bernadette, not knowing of a spring, turned and began walking toward the Gave, but the lady called her back. She indicated a spot on the ground, and Bernadette obediently dug into the earth. The people watching were astounded to see the little visionary apparently eating mud or dirt. From this spot, an underground spring welled up, which today provides water for the pilgrims at Lourdes. One of the beautiful lady's remarks was prophetic of Bernadette's life. I do not promise you happiness in this world, but in the next. During the time of the apparitions, word began to get around, and large crowds of people began coming to the grotto to watch Bernadette. Praying there, Bernadette would enter a state of ecstasy, and observers say her expression was radiant. On 2 occasions, the lady did not appear, and Bernadette was led away weeping. Bernadette was investigated by the police and by the local religious authorities. She never wavered in her story, and she insisted that the lady had asked for a chapel. The parish priest told Bernadette to ask the lady her name. At the last apparition, the lady folded her hands and said, "I am the Immaculate Conception." On previous occasions, the lady had spoken with Bernadette in her native patois or dialect, but when asked her name, she replied in proper French. Bernadette did not understand the words and had to keep repeating them to herself as she went to tell the priest. She asked him what the words meant, as she had never heard them. In spite of the fact that Pope Pius IX had proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception of the Blessed Virgin Mary just 4 years previously in 1854, people began to think of Bernadette as someone special, and they wanted to give her things such as food and money. It is a mark in her favor that Bernadette would not accept these gifts and was determined that she and her family would not profit in this way from the apparitions. She felt that to do so would be stealing. In June of the year of the apparitions, Bernadette made her first Holy Communion at the age of 14. Later, she was asked which gave her more pleasure, the sight of Our Lady or the reception of our Lord. She was unable to reply, saying only that both were the most joyous occasions of her life. 8 more years passed for Bernadette at Lourdes. During part of the time, she attended school with the Sisters of Charity and Christian Instruction of Nevers at their hospice there. They had a school which they allowed her to attend without paying a tuition. During this time, she learned to speak French, to read and to write, and spell somewhat. Although she was a bright girl, school was difficult for Bernadette, and she was never a strong student. When Bernadette was 16, the local priest arranged for her to live with the nuns because of her poor health. Another reason was that many people came to see and talk to her, providing constant interruptions at home. For her protection, while she was with the sisters, a nun always accompanied her to the parlor when there were visitors. In 1866, Monsignor Fourcade came to the hospice to ask Bernadette what she intended to do with her life. He explained that she could not stay with the sisters indefinitely, as she was not a nun. When he brought up the idea that she might like to become a nun, Bernadette answered, "It is impossible, Monsignor. You know very well that I am poor. I haven't got the necessary dowry." The priest explained that sometimes convents accept poor girls if they were convinced that the girls had a true vocation. He concluded the interview by recommending that Bernadette pray to Our Lady for guidance. In April of 1866, Bernadette made formal application to join the sisters who had been her teachers, the Congregation of the Sisters of Charity of Nevers, and in July she left for the novitiate in Nevers. Her name as a religious was Sister Marie Bernard. Once at the Mother House, Bernadette was treated with extremes for the rest of her life. Many people, including some of the sisters treated her as a saint. This was a danger to humility. Others, especially her lawful superiors in the order, treated her as nothing. The mistress of novices was very severe with her, although Bernadette herself said she was nothing, and she had a sensitive nature, and each rebuff must have hurt. However, she accepted everything with humility, never considering herself to be someone extraordinary. She fit into the convent life just like the other sisters. Yet, for all her humility, upon her deathbed, when asking forgiveness for her faults, Bernadette asked pardon particularly for faults of pride. Bernadette thoroughly enjoyed the periods of recreation with her sisters. She told funny stories and sang gentle songs in her native dialect, although she often made the sisters laugh by saying that when she sang, everybody ran away. She had a natural gift of mimicry and provoked much laughter with her imitations of people's mannerisms. As a treatment for her asthma, Bernadette had been told to take snuff. On one occasion, just as she took a pinch, one of the sisters cried out that Bernadette would never be canonized. When Bernadette asked why, the sister replied, "Because you take snuff." They nearly didn't canonize St. Vincent de Paul just because of that. Smiling, Bernadette asked, "Well, does that mean that because you don't take snuff, you will be canonized?" Bernadette had her own distinctive and sometimes humorous way of saying things. She described an agitated sister as wriggling like a cut worm. After a meal of roast fowl, Bernadette became sick to her stomach. To make discussion a bit more delicate, she requested a basin with the explanation, "My little bird is flying away." In the kitchen, when some milk boiled over, the cook cried out, "Here's my milk running away." Bernadette gaily advised her to go quickly and fetch a policeman. Sometimes even Bernadette's advice or rebukes were tinged with humor. When one of her sisters complained that it was difficult to make a proper thanksgiving after communion, Bernadette told her, "You must receive God well. Give him a loving welcome, for then he has to pay us the rent." It was often Bernadette's job to assist in the infirmary. The sisters who were ill reported that she was a loving and tender nurse, concerned for their feelings as well as for their physical health. Yet she could be firm. On one occasion, when Bernadette held the post of head infirmarian, she found that a novice whom she had instructed to stay in bed had arisen and gone to Mass. Bernadette chided her for her disobedience, telling her that obedience was the whole duty of the religious life. She told the novice to go back to bed and also told her not to read. The novice obeyed for a while, but then became bored and began reading a religious book. When Bernadette returned and found her again disobedient, she took the book away. Then, when the novice had recovered and was allowed to leave the infirmary, she asked for her book. Bernadette told her she would have to go to the mistress of novices for it. Bernadette practiced the same firmness with herself. She took advantage of the many opportunities offered by her illnesses and by the observance of the rule in order to practice obedience and mortification. In a poem to our Lord, she wrote, "Have pity on your little servant who, despite all, would like to become one of your greatest lovers." The suffering of frequent illness was Bernadette's cross for the rest of her life. Being sick and feeling useless were particularly difficult for her to bear, since her enthusiastic nature urged her on to activity. She always prayed for patience in suffering and often stated that her job was to be ill. She wrote, "I do not beg you, my God, not to afflict me, but that you abandon me not in my affliction." Bernadette learned to love suffering as the way to God, and the last entry in her notebook reads, "The more I am crucified, the more I rejoice." She suffered the terrible desolation of the dark night of the soul. In fear for her eternal salvation, she prayed fervently to Saint Joseph, whom she considered her father. Bernadette's deep love for the members of her family is shown in her letters to them. In a letter to her brother and godson Pierre, who had only been 7 years old when Bernadette left home, she counseled him either to become a priest, if that was God's will for him, or to learn a trade, but not on any account to become a priest simply for a worldly position. She wrote, "I would rather you become a rag picker." Bernadette ended the letter with the words, "Goodbye, dear godson. I end by embracing you most affectionately. Your very devoted sister and godmother, Sister Marie Bernard Soubirous." On All Saints' Day, one of the sisters heard that Bernadette was ill. She sent her a little bouquet of flowers with the message that they were sent because being All Saints' Day, it was Bernadette's feast day. The answer came back, "Since it is my feast day, it is also yours. Please accept half of my cakes," a special treat allowed to patients in the infirmary. When one of the sisters brought up the topic of the apparitions, Bernadette calmly asked her what she did with the broom when she was finished with it. She continued, "You put it behind the door, and that is what the Virgin has done with me. While I was useful, she used me, and now she has put me behind the door." Bernadette was deeply devoted to the Blessed Mother for the rest of her life. One sister recalled that when praying the Hail Mary, Bernadette's dark, deep-set, sparkling eyes became heavenly. She was seeing Our Lady in spirit, and she looked as though she were in ecstasy. Bernadette longed to see her heavenly mother again. She advised the sister to take a rosary to bed and pray it until she fell asleep. Do the same as little children who fall asleep saying, "Mama, Mama." Bernadette was very fond of a statue of the Blessed Mother at the convent, but she felt that most statues did not portray Our Lady accurately. She said that the sculptors of such images would be startled in heaven to see what the Blessed Virgin really looked like. It has been recorded that several cures were brought about by Bernadette during her life. On one occasion, a woman brought to the convent her little boy who was unable to walk, hoping that Bernadette would touch him. The Mother Superior called Bernadette and told her to take the child to the garden while she spoke with the woman. One of the sisters reported later that Bernadette had a great love for children. She took him in her arms, then, finding him too heavy, put him on the ground. The little fellow ran off gaily to his mother. Bernadette's final illness lasted about 4 months. Her right leg caused her intense suffering, both from a tumor and from a disease of the bone. Her racking cough shook her whole body, increasing the pain of her leg. When nearing death, she kept murmuring, "Heaven, heaven." She also suffered terrible temptations from the devil. Groaning, she seemed to feel him to be near. She cried out, "Go from me, Satan, go." Later, Bernadette became calm. Before she died, on April 16th, 1879, Bernadette whispered, "Holy Mary, Mother of God, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for me, poor sinner, poor sinner." Bernadette was buried on the convent grounds behind the Mother House in Nevers. Her reputation for sanctity spread rapidly, and her cause for beatification was introduced. When the ritual exhumation took place, 30 years after her death, her body was found to be incorrupt. Bernadette was canonized on December the 8th, 1933. Today, lightly coated with wax, her lovely features can still be seen where she rests in the beautiful reliquary coffin in the chapel dedicated to her at the Mother House of her order in Nevers. There's two pictures of her. I'll read the captions. At age 14, Saint Bernadette Soubirous, the visionary of Lourdes, saw the Blessed Virgin in several miraculous apparitions. Our Lady asked for penance in reparation for sins. Bernadette was photographed often, and her pictures were sold everywhere. She joked, "I'm on sale for 10 cents at every street corner." This is a retouched photograph. This one here of her as a nun. And here are two other pictures. Left, Saint Bernadette as a nun, Sister Marie Bernard. This photograph was probably taken when she was 24 years old. Bernadette's life was filled with suffering in fulfillment of Our Lady's prophetic words. "I do not promise you happiness in this world, but in the next." Right, the body of Saint Bernadette, lightly coated with wax, remains miraculously incorrupt. This photograph was taken many years after her death.